This is Gaslit, the power of story, and I'm your host, Tommy Hausman. In this episode, we're turning our attention to a new kind of threat to affordability and stability in Indiana. AI-powered data centers. These aren't the small server rooms we're used to hearing about. We're talking about facilities that can use as much or more electricity than a steel mill, and in some cases, more power than entire cities, with massive implications for our electric bills, our water, our air, and our communities. Joining me today from Citizens Action Coalition are Ryan Stratman, local organizer in Evansville, Ben Inskeep, program director, and Bryce Gustafson, program organizer covering much of the state. Together, they've been tracking 40 plus proposed data center projects across Indiana, analyzing what they mean for our rates, our environment, and our ability to have any real say in what gets built in our backyards. We're going to talk about what makes these new hyperscale AI data centers fundamentally different from the data centers that already exist, how much energy and water they can consume, what kinds of subsidies and tax deals are on the table, and how communities across Indiana have already stopped more than a dozen of these projects by getting organized and pushing back. This episode is about understanding the scale of what's coming and what it will take for ordinary people to respond. Let's get into it. All right, thank you. The Citizens Action Coalition is with me again on Gaslit. Got a different group of people here today. If you could just take a moment to maybe introduce yourselves and tell me what it is that you do with Citizens Action Coalition. You can start, Ryan, since you're here.
Yeah, since I'm here. Ryan Stratman. I'm an organizer, a local organizer here in Evansville for Citizens Action Coalition.
And I'm Ben Inskeep. I'm our program director at Citizens Action Coalition. We are a consumer and environmental advocacy organization. Been doing this work in Indiana for 51 years and counting now. I'll turn it over to Bryce.
Yeah, I'm Bryce Gustafson. I'm the program organizer at Citizens Action Coalition, and I cover most of the state.
All right. So to just kind of fill in the gap here, I think today we're going to talk mostly about data centers today. And so what we're really dealing with. So for people who haven't followed this, what makes this new wave of proposed data centers in Indiana fundamentally different from the ones that already exist, if any do already exist? Do any already exist?
Yes, we do have several dozen data centers in Indiana already, but these are the smaller traditional data centers that have much smaller impacts than the new type of data centers we're seeing proposed today. The new types of data centers that we're seeing pop up across the state of Indiana are primarily to serve artificial intelligence or AI purposes, and these use much more energy intensive processes in order to train their models and do inference, or in other words, whenever you type in something to an AI model like ChatGPT and you get an output from it, that's inference. And that takes a lot of energy in order for those models to process that data and give it an output. So the bottom line is today is that we're seeing data centers come to Indiana that are larger than any type of power user we've ever seen in the history of Indiana, that have much larger impacts. And as a result, there's a lot more concerns from Hoosiers across the state.
So let's define that scale. How much power can these facilities use? I think that in context, you've mentioned in a previous webinar that it's like a major steel mill. Is that accurate, or is it more than that?
It can be even more than that. So we're talking on the order of potentially hundreds to thousands of megawatts of power that just one data center campus could use. So for context, CenterPoint Energy, which serves Southwest Indiana, has about a peak power demand of about 1,100 megawatts. So one data center could be greater than all of CenterPoint's existing customers. So that kind of gives you a scale of what we're talking about here. It's not just a large factory. We're talking about something even potentially an order of magnitude larger than a steel mill or another industrial facility. So something truly on the order of a city-sized amount of power consumption, depending on how big they are.
So water is another concern that we're hearing about. What what do we know about the water demands of hyperscale facilities and the direct water cost of the power plants serving them?
I think the truth is we don't know that much because there's been not a lot of transparency from the data center developers about what types of cooling systems they're going to use, what types of potential water needs they're going to have. And from the ones that we do have information on, we see quite a variety of potential usage. The concern is that some of them are going to use the most intensive amount of water for their cooling systems. And for those types of very water intensive cooling systems, we're talking on the order of hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of gallons of water per day being used by a data center. So potentially a very large impact. Now, there are some types of technologies that are less water intensive, but the trade-off there is they're often much more energy intensive. So if you want to be more water efficient, that can often come at a cost of you're going to be using more power.
Yeah, I've read recently about some chips that don't require so much cooling, and that's the trade-off is more energy. Huh, interesting. So let's get down to what this is really about for our area, and that's affordability. So if they're using this much water, does that cost us something here in southern Indiana or in Indiana in general?
The concern is that this could certainly result in utility bill increases for other consumers if we don't have the right protections in place. And this could be on your water bill, it could be on your electric utility bill, it could be on other types of bills that you pay, just because the demand from these facilities can be so large, it can then result in additional infrastructure needing to be built out in order to serve the facility. And sometimes those costs are spread out across all consumers. And when that happens, we can see bill impacts to other types of customers. So, for example, a data center, a very large data center, might need the utility to build a whole new power plant in order to serve that additional demand. Power plants are getting very expensive, in part because of the very strong amount of AI data center growth across the country, which is driving a mass build out of these facilities, but also raising the cost of them. So the concern is that if a data center were to come to your utility service territory, it might result in the utility needing to act quickly to buy a very expensive new power plant in order to serve them or additional water infrastructure to serve them. And those costs could carry through to other consumers' bills.
So in southern Indiana, we're already paying the second highest rates. How much more are we talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that we're trying to get more answers on. Today we have very little information from a lot of these data centers about, about what the potential impacts can be and the utilities that serve them too. A lot of these deals that are being cut are, behind the scenes or don't have fully fleshed out estimates of what the potential impacts could be. But, just for way of example, if a data center were to come to a location, a utility makes a large investment to serve them, but then the data center customer ends up leaving early or shutting down early, going out of business, any of those types of things, it could result in a large stranded asset or stranded cost that could then fall on to other ratepayer bills. And when you're talking about a facility that uses this much power, the sudden loss of that customer could result in very large impacts to the rest of the consumers that stay on the utility service.
Wow. So we've heard about some sweetheart deals, subsidies, tax carve-outs. How are these costs shifted to regular ratepayers, and what kind of subsidies and tax deals are we looking at here?
Bryce, maybe I could bring you into this conversation too to talk about what some of the local property tax abatements you've seen and what other types of things you're seeing on the ground at the local level.
Yeah, there is state tax exemptions that was passed in 2019, House Bill 1405. And that gives data centers up to 50 years of sales tax exemptions. They didn't do the financials on that bill. They're supposed to, but so we don't really know how many tax money is going to be avoided by that 50 years sales tax exemption. But Ben did calculate on the energy side an average 1 gigawatt or 1,000 megawatt data center could save $34.5 million a year for 50 years, which adds up to about $1.7 billion. That's just for their energy usage. On top of that, they also ask for local tax abatements, and there's no hard set rule on what they ask for, but generally they're asking for 10 years, 100% property tax abatements, so they don't have to pay any property taxes for 10 years. And then anywhere from 25 to 40 years personal property taxes, which that means the equipment inside the building. So, huge amounts of money. I believe, again, Ben did the analysis just for one facility in St. Joseph County, Amazon Web Services data center campus. Conservatively, it would be $8 billion over 50 years that they're going to avoid in paying taxes to communities, to our state, to local communities. So it's extremely significant amount of money that they're not having to pay in the coffers.
Yeah, that's a lot. So these same utility companies in Indiana are talking about delaying coal retirements and rapidly expanding natural gas. And then we're talking about water usage as well. So what kind of climate emissions and long-term environmental impact are we talking about? And how is that going to affect affordability for people in southern Indiana or in Indiana in general?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest concern when it comes to the climate and the environment, is this large build out of data centers across the state of Indiana. It's rapidly eroding the progress we've made over the past several decades, where Indiana has slowly but has gradually improved in terms of our energy consumption, where it's coming from. We've been retiring coal plants over time and building out cleaner generation sources, including solar and wind, to help pick up the need there. So with data centers, there's now been a strong push to delay coal plant retirements, keep them online longer. These are, facilities that have been operating for often 30, 40, 50, 60 or more years even in Indiana. So these are, facilities that are not particularly efficient, that are now getting less and less reliable over time, breaking down. And most importantly, I think for customers in Centerpoint service territory who have experienced some of the highest bills or the highest bills in the state of Indiana for many years, is the economic impact. Coal-fired generation is now some of the most expensive form of electricity generation. We have much more affordable options available. So continuing to keep those online is going to continue to keep bills high. And then now that we're building out additional resources to meet the needs of data centers, there's a concern that these resources are also going to be quite expensive. Specifically, natural gas-fired power plants are one of the main tools that utilities are saying that they want to be able to meet the needs of their data center customers with that type of resource. But these power plants have more than doubled in cost in just the past 3 years. And that's particularly because of the very strong demand from data centers across the country that is making it much harder to get a hold of the equipment to build a gas plant and making it much more expensive to build. So if a utility needs to build such a plant to serve their customers or delay a coal plant retirement, there's concerns that means other ratepayers are going to be paying for this higher cost generation. And so that's, I think, a big concern on the affordability end. And then the environment side of it, of course, these are fossil fuel generating sources. So they're emitting lots of greenhouse gas emissions that are contributing to the climate crisis. They're emitting a lot of local air pollution that worsens the air quality around where those facilities are located and leads to things like asthma, leads to things like, other significant respiratory and health impacts to folks, not to mention the massive coal ash problem that we have across the state of Indiana. More unlined coal ash ponds than anywhere else in the country that need to be cleaned up and properly remediated to make sure that nasty, toxic stuff in coal ash isn't getting into our precious waterways.
So with everything that you just said, and affordability, and everything from noise to diesel generators to land use, what does it actually mean for a community to have a data center as a neighbor?
Yeah, let me pass this one to you, Bryce, if that's okay. What kinds of things have you been hearing from the local community about their concern?
Well, I think the universal concern with these data centers, what we're talking about right now, higher utility bills, water. There's specific issues that folks have concerns on. Just looking out your back window and seeing a giant box and the noise that's constant. They have to keep those fans going 24/7. Those generators, the diesel fumes from the generators, light pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, disruption of a way of life that folks are really willing to protect, especially in rural areas. So what we've seen, that said, what we've seen across the state is a couple dozen communities have, taken up the fight to stop these data centers. And it's been pretty impressive in the last 16, 18 months or so. We've seen now 13 of these projects stopped at the local level. So folks are, I didn't expect maybe data centers to kind of bring everybody together, but that's exactly what's going on here in Indiana.
So you mentioned transparency earlier. Are data centers being transparent with their communities that they're trying to move into, or are there NDAs or shell companies and short notice zoning meetings kind of normal?
I'll take that. Yeah, that's the norm. What we've seen, and it's hard to pin down really the details, but a developer will come into a community, have the landowner and decision makers sign NDAs, talk with decision makers, do that whole process for months, and then they'll announce that proposed data centers come into the community. And in some situations, like Monrovia, they had a developer meeting, a town hall. A week or two later, it was in front of the planning commission because they wanted to rezone the property from agricultural to industrial. And then they said yes to that. And a week later, it was in front of the county commissioners, and they had voted it through. So about a month lead time for folks to really understand what was going on. And each site is different. There has been, fortunately, like in Indianapolis here, we've seen that process slow down to about a 6-month time period. But overall, it becomes one of these issues that gets dropped on people's heads in these communities, and they're really scrambling to figure out what they want to do, whether they support it or they don't. And for what it's worth, there are people that do support these projects. There are decision makers that support the projects, but by and large, people are not calling us to say, hey, how do we support this? It's how do we stop this?
And this might be a little out of your guys' wheelhouse a little bit, but I mean, this AI bubble, it's going. These data centers, they put so much money into it. They're going to go somewhere. I mean, I've seen them even talk about putting them in space. So, I mean, I believe in the power of storytelling. That's why I do this podcast, and I believe, and from what you've said, that I've already stopped 13 of them. But can we stop this?
Yes, as Bryce pointed out, not only can we are succeeding at actually stopping quite a few of these data centers. And when I say we, I mean the folks that live in these communities that are getting organized and working to oppose them. They're reaching out to their elected officials. They're making sure that they're aware of the community sentiment. They're doing the research. They're galvanizing support. They're knocking on neighbors' doors. They're making sure that this type of development coming to their community is going to be consistent with what the community wants. And if it's not, they're making their voices heard. And as Bryce pointed out earlier, this is a really unifying issue that we've seen across Hoosier communities. It's not a partisan issue. We've seen folks from all walks of life, from all partisan ideologies, from all ages, all ethnicities, all areas of the state, from rural parts of the state to more urban parts of the state. They really don't want this, no matter who you're talking to. So this really does seem to be a unifying issue where so many folks, who just care about their communities, care about their families, and are not wanting, massive disruption to that, are getting together and are making their voices heard and succeeding. So I think this is an example of an issue where folks can make a difference, in that when we work together, we can have a significant impact.
So one of the net positives that we talk about when we take an analysis of a new company or a new factory coming to the area is job creation. So based on the data, do these data centers actually create meaningful local employment or any kind of economic growth that's beneficial to the local economy or the state?
Well, we certainly know that they can create construction jobs, short-term construction jobs to build the data center itself. Now, after that, the amount of jobs seems to be very, very small. The data center announcements we've seen in the state of Indiana have projected very few permanent jobs at the data center to actually operate it. We're talking on the order of maybe dozens to a few hundred jobs for some of these very massive facilities that are using as much power as an entire city. So by comparison, other types of economic development, other types of industry generally provides on the order of 100 times as many jobs per unit of power than a data center does. So this is kind of one of the fewest jobs per unit of energy that goes into it of all industries. And I think one of the bigger, philosophical issues too is that these are by and large for artificial intelligence. And so this is a technology that by its very purpose, at least by what some of the technology company owners are saying is, it's a technology designed to eliminate jobs, right? It's designed to give companies the option to have fewer people hired. So at the end of the day, you have to wonder, even if there are a few dozen jobs created in my community, am I contributing or is this facility contributing to maybe thousands of more job losses elsewhere?
And for context, Toyota up in Princeton uses about 50 megawatts of electricity. So if you're talking about 1,000 megawatts for 100 jobs, it's pretty minuscule compared to what we have, locally here with Toyota, the thousands they employ.
So I've been doing a lot of research on AI and how it's and its social impact. And I think one of the things that I've been trying to drive home is that when we do see a new technology, typically throughout history, we do see a job creation. It's a new job creation, new markets. I don't see that happening with AI, just like you said. I think that the whole point of AI is to eliminate jobs, from humanoid robots to AI to advanced AI automation. I think that is a really good point to drive home that when these things come into play and they come into our community, it doesn't mean more jobs. It actually means more of cost of everything and less jobs. And Indiana's leadership is kind of aggressively courting big tech. So, I mean, how many of these things are we talking about that are here now, that are being proposed? And you said you've stopped 13. How many are coming? Are any coming to Southern Indiana? What are we really looking at here? And is there any net benefit at all?
I can start. I think we're tracking, and Bryce, feel free to jump in, but I think we're over 45 proposed data centers in terms of large scale data centers across the state of Indiana. Now, many of them have focused on the northern part of the state and increasingly kind of around the Indianapolis area, but we are starting to see other areas of the state impacted too. So, for example, one project that popped up recently that we don't have a lot of details on yet, but could be located down in CenterPoint's service territory in Southwest Indiana, is a project known by Project Raider. So it's kind of a code name. We don't know who that end user is, but it's a potential 600 megawatt end user. So it sounds like it could be a data center, and that would be located, we believe, in the Posey or Gibson County area. Could potentially come online by 2027, so just a couple years away. And we know that CenterPoint, as part of their resource planning process, had recently gone through that process and has specifically included a sensitivity analysis to say what happens if a large data center comes, because they're actively having those negotiations as we speak. And that analysis shows that if a large data center were to come, CenterPoint's main plan to power that data center would be to keep online their existing Coley Unit 3 for much longer than it's currently planned to be online. So a much longer continuation of coal into the 2040s, as well as additional resource build out. So that's one example of a project. Bryce, I don't know if you want to add anything additional about what we're seeing across the state of Indiana and maybe Southwest Indiana as well.
Not too much to add. I mean, as Ben said, the hot spots are Northwest Indiana, increasingly around Indianapolis, but they're really popping up everywhere. It's whack-a-mole. Within the last 2 weeks, I think there's been at least a half a dozen new projects that have been revealed that we know of. So every time I'm driving through rural Indiana and I see a plot of land for 100 acres for sale, it sends up some red flags for me. But yeah, they're really popping up everywhere, and everybody is on guard around the state on this issue.
So can you guys reiterate, if we have one coming to southwestern Indiana in Posey County, how much power is using compared to how much power our local utility company is already generating, or compare that to local plants and factories in town like Toyota? Can you please just say those numbers one more time?
Yeah, I got a good stat for you on this. So the Project Raider, that one data center potential project that we know about in Southwest Indiana, could potentially use 600 megawatts of power. To put that into context, the center point, that's about 3.5 times as much electricity as that data center would need. Let me say that again. That data center could use more than 3 times the amount of electricity that all households in CenterPoint service territory use in a year. So everybody, all 150,000 households that CenterPoint serves in Southwest Indiana, multiply that by more than 3, and that's how much electricity this type of data center could use.
And in CenterPoint's latest IRP, the Integrated Resource Planning, they did a sensitivity analysis, and for was it 100, 300, and 1,000 megawatts in terms of what they would plan to do if something like a large load customer came online. They estimated that the net present value of just 300 megawatts would be about $5 billion.
For the community.
Yeah, that's how much. Yeah.
You mean the cost, right? The cost of the
the
resources,
cost,
right, Ryan?
Yeah.
And typically these utility companies, they don't absorb that cost. They transfer it to us. So we would be paying $5 billion more in utility costs. Is that accurate?
I think that would be accurate. Ben, would you chime in on that?
And the data center itself would be contributing to that.
Yeah.
So the question would be, are they fully paying their fair share? Or would some of those costs get shifted onto other customers, like households in Evansville, which we've seen historically happen, where CenterPoint continues to put forward methodologies that end up shifting costs caused by their industrial customers onto households in Southwest Indiana. And that's one of the reasons why rates are so much higher in Southwest Indiana compared to the rest of the state. Most of our other utilities use different methods that don't shift that much burden onto households, unlike CenterPoint.
That's a lot to take in, guys. So you've told me, a couple times now that we've stopped 13 of these things in Indiana, right? So if people learn that a data center is coming to their community, what can they realistically do? Is anything already decided, or can communities push back? Is it too late? When is it too late? What can we do? Do we need to get organized now? You said they're popping up everywhere like whack-a-mole. Is that their strategy, to suggest them and propose them so fast that we can't keep up? What are we supposed to do?
Well, folks need to get together and organize. I mean, they need to show up. First of all, you have to find out if a project's coming to your community. Once you do, that's when you have to get organized. Start showing up to county council meetings or city council meetings, that sort of thing. People have, as been mentioned earlier, door knocking, flyering, yard signs are a big hit all across the state. Things like that. And generally what they have to do, the first step is they have to get a rezone from agricultural to industrial, and have to go through that process. So, and then it goes to the decision makers, and they can decide whether they're going to pass it through or not. But there has been some lawsuits involved as well. But the issue is, knowledge, getting that knowledge out as quickly as possible, getting your your neighbors, your friends together and deciding what they can do to put pressure on the public officials to say no to these things.
Yeah, can I chime in? I'd like to add that, I really want to emphasize that speed issue of if you do find a data center coming to your community or a proposal for one, you want to take action quickly. Some types of other projects, large, industrial projects, you might learn about it and it might still be a couple years away and there's still months to think about, to plan, so on and so forth. With data centers, what we're seeing in some communities is, they pop up very quickly, and the critical local zoning decision might only be a few weeks or a few months away. And so it really is critical that you take action immediately in terms of doing that organization that Bryce is talking about and getting engaged at that local level, because that is the key point in time when communities can make a big impact on a project, is that initial vote at the local level for rezoning. That's absolutely critical to think about in terms of where can I be effective? Where's my voice going to carry the most weight? It's that very initial process.
And that would be in your area planning commission. Those are the ones that decide the zoning issues. And also your county commissioners make some of those decisions.
So you should be contacted immediately. Yeah. So Ben, you and I recently talked to the Houston Chronicle, and they were doing a comparison about how their utility company has done in their area and what that same utility company has done in our area. And she talked with me about comparing how the communities reacted. And so I just want to reiterate, one of the things that she said to me is what was so different about Evansville is our social action. Is that how we have a podcast, Gaslit, this podcast that's trying to figure out what's going on, how we have Citizens Action Coalition, how we have direct action against Centerpoint Energy, how we have all these different groups, these protests, this 9 hours of testimony when they wanted to raise rates. So, and you're telling me that we've already stopped 13. So I think that is what we really need to drive home here, is that we can make a difference here, even though we're a smaller base in Evansville, Indiana than in Houston. Our voices can make a difference and can stop this from happening if we feel it's not what's best for our community. Is that safe to say?
You can certainly, definitely you can have a big impact. And I want to give Southwest Indiana a big shout out for all of the amazing organizing everybody has done down there to date, particularly over the past 5 years or so, on the issue of affordability for your electric utility rates. That has not gone unnoticed. There's a lot of policymakers who are rattled by affordability now rising to the top of the list in terms of political priorities. And I think we're seeing the tides change. We're seeing that consistent pressure that's being applied, those calls to action, the amazing turnout we saw at these hearings, all this work that has happened over years where it might have felt like nothing's happening and is it even worth getting involved? And maybe the writing's already on the wall and we can't do anything about it. I think we're seeing the opposite. I think we're seeing a new era in terms of this is an issue that is politically salient. There's a lot of pressure on key politicians to address this issue. And I think the data center issue is an excellent example where when local communities get together, get organized, and fight a project that does not fit their community needs, they can succeed in terms of stopping it or getting significant concessions to ensure it aligns with the community.
That's great. So before we start to close up, I want to give all of you guys, an opportunity to add anything to the conversation that you might want to add, information that you might want to pass on to our listeners, where people can stay informed, get updates, take action, anything that you feel pertinent you need to add to this conversation before we wrap up. Go ahead, Bryce.
Oh, I'll just add about, those fights. If I said it before, but if I had $1 for every time somebody said it was a done deal, I could probably retire now. So you hear that, it's a done deal, it's a done deal. And sometimes it's a lot harder than other, all these fights, there's no two fights alike, essentially. But my own experience with the Franklin Township group and here in Indianapolis, it was 5 of us for 5 months. And then everybody came out of the woodwork at the very end. But those 5 folks, myself included, were holding down the fort, not giving up, not losing hope, continuing to fight. And that's important because I think success begets success as far as it goes. So, but yeah, hang in there and keep fighting because hang in there and keep fighting. The issue with Centerpoint down there, that's been going on for years and years, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. These things take time to change.
How about you, Ben?
Yeah, I'll just add that, please feel free to check out our website, citact.org. You can sign up for our emails there. We have a lot of resources we put out there and, send out calls to action when there's significant things that happen. So that's a great way to stay in touch. And if you want to follow up with us, if you have questions or if a data center comes to your area and you want help getting organized, you can find our contact information there. So we appreciate it.
And Ryan, wrap us up.
Yeah. Well, I will say, a lot of these rural communities are seeing a decline in the tax base and populations. They're seeing a loss of funding from the state as well. So when a company like Meta, Google, Amazon knock on their door, it seems very attractive at the beginning. And I don't know what's said behind closed doors. But, at the end of the day, these data centers are not good for the community. And I think it's important to be proactive in that, letting your local government officials know that when they do come, it's best to stop that then as opposed to having that later on, and putting that into proactive, proactive actions.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Bryce. Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate you guys being on Gaslit, the Power of Story, where we are using storytelling as social action and hopefully making a difference. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you so much for having us.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tommy.
Right. You've been listening to Gaslit, the Power of Story. Today, we heard from Citizens Action Coalition about how AI data centers are reshaping Indiana's future, from energy use and water demand to tax subsidies, local noise and pollution, and the long-term cost that could be shifted onto everyday ratepayers. We talked about what it really means when a single facility can use more power than all the households in our local utility company service territory. How billions in tax breaks and infrastructure costs can be handed to some of the wealthiest corporations on earth, and why utilities are talking about delaying coal retirements and rapidly expanding gas instead of investing in clean, affordable options. We also heard something just as important, that this is not a done deal. Communities across Indiana have already stopped at least 13 data center projects by getting informed, getting organized, and showing up at zoning hearings, at county commission meetings, and in direct communication with their elected officials. If you want to stay informed, get updates, or take action, you can connect with Citizens Action Coalition at citact.org. You'll find links, resources, and ways to plug in. For more stories, transcripts, and episodes of Gaslit, the Power of Story, visit fireside.evansville.edu/gaslit. You can also follow and share the podcast wherever you listen, and help amplify these stories so more of our neighbors understand what's at stake. I'm Tommy Hausman. This is Gaslit, the Power of Story, where we use storytelling as social action and work together to make sure our communities are no longer ignored, dismissed, or gaslit. Thanks for listening.